If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
Hi, everyone. It is 5 o'clock here in New York. I'm Letitia Menendez in for Nicole Wallace. And that was New York Attorney General Letitia James putting the disgraced, twice impeached, 4 times indicted ex-president on notice that his pride and joy, his real estate empire, is fair game. Telling ABC News that she will seize those assets if Trump fails to pony up the massive amount of money he must now fork over in the wake of Judge Engoron's decision in the civil fraud trial here in New York.
Okay, stop right there. You just heard it loud and clear. New York Attorney General Letitia James is finished playing nice. If Donald Trump cannot pay what the court ordered, she will march into court and demand his assets be seized. Not some side property. Not a manageable inconvenience. The entire real estate empire he spent a lifetime constructing on lies, fabricated valuations, and outright bank fraud. The judgment already smashed past $354 million. Interest is still grinding at more than $87,000 every single day. That daily interest alone could buy a luxury home every week while he stalls and postures. And James is not glancing at random addresses. She is staring straight at the buildings that carry the Trump name, the golden props of his manufactured greatness, and openly declaring them fair game.
But a crooked New York State judge just ruled that I have to pay a fine of $355 million for having built a perfect company. Great cash, great buildings, great everything. This is Russia, this is China, this is the same game. All comes out of the DOJ, it all comes out of Biden. It's a witch hunt against his political opponent, the likes of which our country has never seen before. You see it in third world countries, banana republics, but you don't.
Asset seizure is a routine legal tool prosecutors use every day against debtors who simply refuse to pay. For Trump, it becomes something far uglier, an existential public gutting of the myth he sold the world. What separates this from every other legal mess he created is brutal and simple. This judgment cannot be erased by any future election. No presidential power reaches into a New York civil court to make it vanish. That cold reality is finally landing, and the panic is no longer something he can hide behind slogans.
Well, Attorney General Letitia James says the property right here behind me is on her radar. It is 40 Wall Street. It is a Donald Trump property. And she says if Trump does not pay his $354 million judgment, she might be coming for it. Last week, former President Trump was slapped with a $354 million judgment, plus interest that compounds every day in his civil fraud case in New York. The case brought by State Attorney General Letitia James. In an interview with ABC News, James warning Trump to pay up.
We are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers.
The Attorney General saying if Trump does not have the money to pay off his judgment, she will go after some of his real estate properties, including the skyscraper at 40 Wall Street.
I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
She will not succeed in that effort.
Commercial litigation and bankruptcy lawyer Leo Jacobs says AG James has to get in a long line of others before she might ever see a dime from Trump's properties.
Number one is the other lien holders, equity holders, judgment lien holders, taxes, New York City, New York State. The list goes on and on and on.
Which he says would take years. And as has been reported many times, Trump does not own every building bearing his name. Trump is known for licensing his name to other developers.
Look closer at 40 Wall Street. This is not just another tower on the skyline. It is one of the clearest exhibits of how Trump's entire fortune was inflated through deliberate deception. Court records showed he repeatedly valued this building hundreds of millions higher than independent appraisals, then used those fantasy numbers to secure better loan terms he never deserved. The same pattern of fraud that Judge Engoron documented across his portfolio sits right here in steel and glass. James choosing this property is surgical. It sits in the heart of the financial district, the very world Trump always claimed to dominate. Seizing it would not only recover money for New Yorkers, it would publicly strip the gold-plated myth he spent decades selling. Every time someone walks past and sees the Trump name still attached, that name now carries the weight of proven lies instead of manufactured success.
And I thought we'd come down to 40 Wall Street, which is a great building, and you'd get a chance to see one of the nicest buildings in New York and a convenient place, and I don't have to pay any rent because we have it, and it's been a very successful building.
The optics of cameras rolling while the name comes down would complete the humiliation he has spent a lifetime trying to avoid. That is why the pressure is real and why the old swagger is cracking.
Well, here's what that looked like last night during a Fox News town hall.
Now, in this New York civil fraud case, this Judge Arthur Engeron ruled against you for actually almost $500 million plus interest that runs every day. When I first read this, like $87,000 a day. How will you put up that kind of money? Because you have a bond to put up. Even if you appeal, you got to put up escrow money. That's it's a lot of dough.
It is a form of Navalny. It is a form of communism or fascism.
No, let's be clear. It is nothing short of revolting to compare his many, many self-inflicted legal woes to the murder of Alexei Navalny, a murder that Trump still refuses to condemn Vladimir Putin over. But what if it is also a sign that the looming fine in the New York civil fraud case and the possibility that Tish James could seize his beloved buildings has finally gotten under Donald Trump's skin? And that is where we start this hour with former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman. Also with us, former Congressman from Florida and current MSNBC political analyst David Jolly. And here with me at the table for the hour, former top State Department official and MSNBC political analyst Rick Stengel. Harry, I want you to walk us through where we are in the countdown to when Trump must pay up, whether in the form of a bond or otherwise.
So when 30 days runs, about another 20-some, if he wants to appeal, and that's his right, he's got to pony up that bond. And you can think of it like a criminal defendant who has an enormous bond. If he doesn't have it in cash, he'll have to make deals with people and have collateral and the like. But what happens at the end if he refuses to pay? Tish James could be very soft-spoken, as she wasn't there. She's rattling sabers, but it's really the law saber here. It's straightforward. Prosecutors do it every day. Federal offices have departments just for asset forfeiture. There's ways to do it with the court. You can't take blood from a stone, but if he has assets and won't pay cash, you go to court and you say, we would like these, please, and you seize them. End of story. So it's a very tangible, indeed, kind of routine mechanism for defendants who will not pay up. So it's a very serious kind of threat. Nothing bombastic about it.
This is not a clumsy slip of the tongue. It is a calculated obscenity. Alexei Navalny flew back to Russia fully aware he would be arrested, survived a state-sponsored poisoning, endured a closed trial with no real evidence presented to him, and was killed in an Arctic prison. Trump faces an open civil court after decades of submitting financial statements that independent appraisals and bank records later proved were systematically inflated. He obtained loans on terms he never earned by lying about the value of his properties. That is fraud, documented in painstaking detail. Yet the moment the judgment lands, he reaches for the name of a murdered dissident. He briefly calls Navalny brave, then immediately pivots to himself without once naming Vladimir Putin the man whose regime is widely held responsible. He has praised that same dictator for years. He now borrows the corpse of Putin's fiercest critic to claim he is the real political prisoner. The distance between the two stories is not subtle. One man used his freedom to fight for his people. The other used his freedom to fleece banks and taxpayers.
It is a form of Navalny. It is a form of communism or fascism.
This move exposes the panic at its rawest. When the usual tactics of denial and deflection stop working, Trump reaches for the most extreme, most dishonest comparison available. He turns a proven fraud case into a morality play in which he is the persecuted hero. The record shows the opposite. The courts showed the opposite. And the comparison itself only makes the self-inflicted nature of his crisis clearer.
So, David Jolly, if we know anything about Donald Trump, it is that he almost pathologically doesn't like to pay people unless he absolutely has to. He deeply cares about the optics, as we just heard from Rick Stengel. He has to pay, or he has to face the optics of a building with the name Trump being bolted to the side, being seized by Letitia James. What is going through his mind, do you think, right now?
Yeah. Yeah, Alicia, this is going to happen. It's just a matter of when, not if. I mean, the likelihood, Harry could opine on this, but the likelihood of Donald Trump somehow winning on an appeal is very slim. So get the TV cameras ready and get the popcorn ready, because we might all watch Donald Trump lose his real estate empire and the Trump name come off of buildings. And I think what's going through his mind, this is the fascinating thing. We often conflate all of the legal proceedings against him, but this is one that he cannot remedy simply by being elected president. This civil judgment in New York that Letitia James has sought is not something that Donald Trump, should he be elected, has the power to undo. This is not a federal case. This is not a criminal culpability case. This is something that Letitia James and the criminal justice or civil justice system in New York exclusively holds the remedy for. And I think that is the panic that's setting in. Sure, he's being exposed as a fraud, but even if he can manipulate the storyline around Donald Trump now being exposed as a fraud, what really hurts is the wealth and the loss of his wealth, and that's why you see the panic.
Well, Harry, to pick up on that point, you've written about just how devastating the Engoron decision was for Trump, not just in terms of the money, but existentially. You wrote, quote, "The opinion also constitutes a body blow to the brand that Trump has spent a lifetime mythologizing. Titans of commerce don't tend to cough up huge fraud judgments or ask anyone's permission to write a check. The extent to which the Trump brand is propped up by lies has always been open to question. After Engoron's verdict, the brand is propped up by even less." If Tish James does in fact seize one of his buildings, what kind of body blow is that for Trump, for the brand?
Yeah. You know, as always, what David said, and just think about the day and the bowls of popcorn as the big Trump name comes down from Trump Tower, and I don't know, Empire State goes up. I mean, it is really he always exaggerates his brand, but there are indicia of it. Names everywhere, certain kind of gold that goes away. He's just one other guy on the street, a former wannabe real estate tycoon. And the brand, really, he spent a lifetime building. I think next to his liberty is the thing he wants to preserve, and his odds of doing it, as David just said, have really plummeted.
What truly terrifies Trump is not the money alone. It is the public dismantling of the brand he spent a lifetime mythologizing. The name on those buildings was never decoration. It was the central prop in a carefully constructed fiction of invincible success. Real titans of commerce do not watch their signature towers become targets for forfeiture after a court rules they lied about values for decades. They do not beg for time to write a check. They do not face the prospect of their own name being physically unbolted while cameras record every second. This judgment is different from every other legal disaster he has created. It is a New York civil ruling. No future presidency can erase it. No federal power can reach in and make the findings or the disgorgement disappear. That single fact is what produces the visible panic. The exposure as a fraud can still be spun into victimhood. The loss of wealth and the visible stripping of the brand cannot. When the big gold letters finally come down, the illusion collapses with them. The same man who demanded to be treated as a billionaire king will be reduced to a former branding experiment whose name is being stripped from the stone in real time. The brand that was propped up by lies will stand exposed for exactly what the fraud case already proved it was, a hollow performance. He spent a lifetime dodging the full cost of his own deceptions. This time, the cost arrives with court authority and no political escape hatch left.
Here's the thing, David Jolly, which is the four of us, our audience, everyone understands that this is disgorgement, that this is the return of ill-gotten profits. But that's not the story he's going to be out there telling, right, David? He's going to say, look at the government taking away what I spent a lifetime building. He is going to weave this into a false narrative that his base is likely to buy hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, sadly and disgustingly, I think the Navalny analogy is going to stick in Republican parlance. You saw Newt Gingrich kind of trial balloon it even before Donald Trump grabbed it and used it. So this is taking victimhood not just to the absurd, but to the disgusting. And they would say to Donald Trump and Republicans this: if you truly think that Donald Trump was being exposed to the same level of criminal justice that Putin has used for Alexei Navalny, Tish James would have already pushed Donald Trump out of a high-story window. This is apples and oranges. Navalny had a secret trial where the evidence was not given to him. He was charged with essentially speaking out against the ruling regime. That is not this case. This is a case of fraud where Donald Trump lied about his finances, lied about his records to secure loans he otherwise wasn't qualified for, cheating the system and ultimately cheating taxpayers. But Donald Trump will use this as victimhood. But the good news here is when we see this happen, sure, it works to ramp up intensity among Republicans. It is not an effective general election message. Yeah. It simply isn't. And it focuses in for Donald Trump on all the wrong issues when it comes to general election voters.
What did you make of that Navalny comment?
I thought it was an obscenity. I mean, Navalny, one of the most courageous freedom fighters in human history, came back to challenge a dictator. Donald Trump supports that dictator. In his criticism of what happened in Navalny, he didn't mention Putin once. Navalny was trying to win freedom for his people. Trump used the freedom he had to fleece people. I mean, it couldn't be more opposite. I hope it has some resonance in the general election campaign, despite what David said, because it's really appalling.
What we have watched unfold is the slow, methodical process of a court system forcing a man who spent decades extracting money through deception to return what he never should have received. Disgorgement is not a fine invented for political enemies. It is a standard civil remedy designed to strip away profits obtained by fraud so that the wrongdoer does not keep the benefit of the lie. In this case, the lies were systematic. Asset values inflated far beyond reality, financial statements presented to banks as accurate when they were not, and a pattern of conduct that allowed loans and deals on terms that would never have been available if the truth had been told. The victim narrative being constructed around this judgment is therefore not merely false. It is a deliberate inversion of reality. A man found liable for years of financial fraud is now casting the enforcement of that finding as tyranny. The same individual who treated contracts as optional, who left a trail of unpaid vendors and abandoned projects, who repeatedly used the legal system as a delay tactic rather than a forum for truth, suddenly discovers a passionate belief in due process the moment the process reaches his own assets. Consider the mechanics that are now in motion. When a civil judgment of this magnitude goes unpaid, the law does not rely on the debtor's goodwill. It provides concrete enforcement tools. Creditors can seek turnover orders, restraining notices, and ultimately the appointment of receivers to take control of specific properties. These are not exotic or political inventions. They are the ordinary instruments used against ordinary debtors who simply refuse to satisfy a court order. The difference here is scale and symbolism. The properties in question are not anonymous warehouses. They are the physical embodiments of a personal brand that was marketed as proof of genius and invincibility. Removing the name from those buildings is therefore more than debt collection. It is the forced public correction of a lifetime of self-mythology. That mythology was never sustainable. For years, the public was sold an image of endless liquidity and unmatched deal-making skill. The civil fraud trial forced the production of actual records. Those records told a different story. Valuations that swung wildly depending on the audience, properties listed at figures that bore little relation to market reality, and a consistent willingness to treat numbers as flexible tools rather than facts. When a court examines that pattern under oath and under evidence rules, the brand begins to look less like a reflection of success and more like a carefully maintained performance. The performance is now colliding with enforcement. Interest continues to accrue. Bonds must be posted or properties must be offered as collateral. Every delay increases the eventual cost. And because this is a state civil judgment rather than a federal criminal sentence, the ordinary political levers that have been discussed in other contexts simply do not reach it. The New York courts retain authority. The Attorney General retains the ability to move for enforcement. No change in federal administration rewrites the judgment or freezes the collection process. That structural reality is what distinguishes this case and what produces the distinctive quality of the current panic. There is also a longer pattern that deserves attention. This is not an isolated collision with the legal system. It is the latest chapter in a decades-long approach to debt, contracts, and accountability. Multiple corporate bankruptcies, repeated disputes with contractors and lenders, and a public record of treating legal obligations as negotiable rather than binding form a consistent background. The civil fraud judgment did not invent that history. It simply made the financial consequences impossible to postpone any longer. The deeper damage is therefore not only monetary, It is reputational and existential in the precise sense that the brand and the man had become inseparable. When the gold letters come down, the separation becomes visible. The public is left with a clearer view of what was always true. The appearance of wealth was maintained through techniques that a court has now ruled fraudulent. The claims of unmatched business brilliance sit alongside a judgment that requires the return of ill-gotten gains. The image of the fearless strongman sits alongside a live demonstration of panic when ordinary legal consequences finally arrive. None of this requires exaggeration. The court record is public. The enforcement mechanisms are ordinary. The interest continues to run. The buildings remain identifiable targets. The only extraordinary element is the size of the ego that insisted for so long that none of the ordinary rules would ever apply. That insistence is ending. Not through political theater, not through media narrative, but through the unglamorous machinery of civil enforcement. The process is slow, technical, and indifferent to branding. It does not care about rallies or slogans. It cares about whether the judgment has been satisfied. If it has not, the next steps are available and well established. What we are witnessing is the collision between a personal myth and a court order that cannot be spun out of existence. The myth was always more fragile than its promoter claimed. The court order is not. If you understand the difference between a real legal consequence and a campaign talking point, leave a like. If you want to see how far the enforcement process actually goes, drop your prediction in the comments. And if you want the continuing record of how this case unfolds without the filter of self-pity, subscribe. The story is still being written in court filings, not in speeches.